Together, you will die.
Hey there guys, this is your host Richard with another marvelous video. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is almost here, and if you don't have the time for a Planet of the Apes marathon, we've got you covered. It all began with French author Pierre Boulle's 1963 novel, which inspired the first Planet of the Apes movie in 1968. It was a smash hit and was followed by 4 sequels up until 1973. Also, throw in a television show and an animated series in between. After a long gap, a remake of the 1968 movie was released in 2001. It kind of failed to match up to the original one, but remains a remarkable addition to the franchise. A decade later, the Planet of the Apes storyline was reimagined and thus began the massively successful reboot series of films. In 2011, released Rise of the Planet of the Apes, followed by 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes. The upcoming film, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, makes the 4th installment in the series, which follows the same continuity. In today's video, we'll break down the preceding 3 Planet of the Apes films from this continuity, so that you're all prepped for the big release on May 10th. Let's begin, shall we? Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, 2011. Directed by Rupert Wyatt, this first entry of the reboot series breathed new life into the franchise. Andy Serkis jumped on board as the protagonist ape named Caesar, who went from being a household chimpanzee to a formidable ape leader during this film. Caesar is the reimagined version of its movie predecessor of the same name, who was the lead character of the 1972 and 1973 films. 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes recreated Caesar as a chimpanzee born in a lab, who inherited the enhanced intelligence and advanced genetic structure of its mother, who was an experimental test subject in a biolab. Mind-boggling, right? Let's tell you the whole story. Based in San Francisco, a young scientist, Will Rodman, is looking for a cure to Alzheimer's disease and carries out his research work for the biotechnology organization named GenSys. He tests the experimental drug ALZ-112 on chimpanzees, following which one of these test subject apes shows improved intelligence and cognition. What the ALZ-112 promises to do is repair nerves and generate cells within the brain for enhanced cognition, something that keeps Alzheimer's at bay. During a pitch meeting with the investors at GenSys, the test subject chimpanzee displayed extreme aggression and had to be shot down. Thus, the official production of the drug was halted forever. Soon enough, it was discovered that the chimpanzee was pregnant, and she turned violent to protect her newborn son, and not because of the drug. Rodman ended up taking the baby chimp home and named him Caesar. That's not the only sneaky thing Rodman did. A heartbroken Rodman, played by James Franco, also stole a few vials of the ALZ-112 and started treating his father with the drug, and he got great results. Thus, Rodman created a makeshift lab at home to perfect his research on the Alzheimer's drug and also built a bedroom for Caesar, who became a part of the family. Interestingly, the ALZ-112 drug had passed on to Caesar from his pregnant mother, and he too developed the same green irises as his mum, which is a significant mark of being altered by the ALZ-112 drug. On a day 2 on Earth, Caesar could hold a feeding bottle on his own. Cut to 3 years later, Caesar's developed a brilliant IQ with enhanced intelligence and cognitive abilities, being able to solve puzzles designed for 8-year-olds and up. Caesar is also brilliant at chess and is learning sign language from Rodman. He theorized that in the absence of damaged cells in Caesar's brain that the ALZ-112 is designed to cure, the drug has boosted his brain functioning more than anticipated. However, with growing age, Caesar became more and more curious about the world outside, and every time he attempted to venture out, he landed in trouble. Thus, Rodman and his girlfriend, a kind-hearted vet played by Frida Pinto, took Caesar to the redwood forests across the Golden Gate Bridge. With permission from Rodman, Caesar climbed his first real tree at the age of 5 and took in the sight of the entire San Francisco Bay from the top. This became a regular outing for the trio, until one day when Caesar was barked at by a pet dog, prompting Caesar to question his position in the Rodman family. "Am I a pet?" he asked, forcing the truth out of Rodman, who told him that his mum died because of the experiments and that he genetically inherited the enhanced intelligence from his mum. One day, when Rodman's father got worse with Alzheimer's, he stepped out of the house and crashed the neighbor's car. When the rude neighbor misbehaved with the old man, Caesar leapt out of the window, chased the neighbor down, and bit off his finger, forcing the neighbors to call the police and animal control on them. Caesar was sent away and imprisoned in a hellish shelter for primates that poses to be all animal-friendly, but in reality keeps the apes locked in cages. The in charge of the facility personally ensures that the apes are tortured with water pipes and electric shocks, creating an atmosphere of terror. In addition to the torture, Caesar is bullied by the other primates for wearing clothes. However, believing that Roland is going to come back for him, Caesar draws a window on his cage wall, just like the one at home, and keeps to himself. When Roland failed to take Caesar back home during the second visit, it left Caesar heartbroken, grieved, and angered. This was the turning point for him. Motivated to revolt against injustice, not just toward him, but also toward the other caged apes, Caesar devised an ingenious plan to escape the facility. Meanwhile, the ALZ-112 drug stopped working for Roland's father, which urged him to develop a more powerful version named the 113. While the drug seemed to work perfectly on apes, it had fatal side effects on humans, causing them to bleed to death, something that Roland was unaware of. This drug plays a central role in the next movie, but more on that later. Now, during his escape trial run, Caesar paid a quick visit to Roland's home, stole the vials of the 113 drug, and returned to the facility. There, Caesar released the drug when the other primates were asleep, thus infecting them and enhancing their intelligence overnight. The next day, the real action began. Caesar has taken charge of the escape mission, and the other apes have already accepted him as their leader. Caesar's not up for killing humans, but he accidentally electrocuted the torturous facility employee when he attempted to hurt the apes with the hose pipe. After escaping the facility, along with all the other primates, Caesar and his gang wreaked havoc at the Genesis labs and released the caged apes that were locked up for experiments. In a chilling scene, Caesar and his army also freed up some apes from the zoo and picked up parts of the iron fence as spears. Next, Caesar set his eyes on a destination redwood forest, but for that, he and his apes would have to cross the Golden Gate Bridge, which has been barricaded by armed forces. Furthermore, alerted by the Genesis boss Jacobs, aerial forces were also dispatched to shoot down the apes, prompting Caesar to chart an impressive battle plan. He instructed half his army to crawl along under the bridge and half of them to climb up. Then, taking advantage of the fog, he made them attack the human forces all at once. By this time, Caesar has also learnt to speak, ride a horse, and use weapons. A 6-hour-long clash ensued between the ape rebels and the human forces on the Golden Gate Bridge, in which both sides suffered casualties. Caesar lost one of his best buddies, a gorilla, who jumped at a shooting helicopter to save Caesar's life. In retaliation, Caesar left the fate of the Genesis boss Jacobs, who was in the helicopter, at the hands of an aggressive chimp named Koba, who was a test subject at Genesis. Owing to Caesar's plan and his expertise as a leader, the apes were victorious in this bloodbath of a battle, and with the Golden Gate Bridge all cleared up ahead of them, they entered the redwood forest in the Muir Woods as their new, safe sanctuary. In the final scenes, Will Roland chased down Caesar all the way to the forest to take him back home, only for Caesar to reject the offer and say, "Caesar is home." Having established himself as the leader of the ape army, Caesar must now watch over his new family at their new sanctuary. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, 2014. 3 years later, released the second part, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, a much darker, brooding, violence-filled addition to the franchise. Remember Koba, the tortured ape from Genesis Labs in the previous film? He's the main baddie of this film. Oops, we gave you the spoiler already, but we haven't told you how that happens, so let's get going. The 2014 movie, directed by Matt Reeves, is set 10 years after the events of the previous one. This movie takes place in a post-pandemic world, where the ALZ-113 virus has wiped out almost all of Earth's population, with 1 out of 500 being immune to the virus. The ALZ-113 turned out to be extremely contagious, resulting in flu-like symptoms among humans and their eventual death. As the apes were resistant to the virus and its outbreak coincided with the Golden Gate Bridge incident of the previous film, it was rumored that the apes are the source of this virus, and thus it came to be known as the simian flu, which obliterated a population ranging from 5 to 150 million within 6 to 8 months. However, the source of the virus was traced back to the Genesis labs, the first scientist who contracted it being referred to as Patient Zero. He was the scientist who wanted to alert Will Rodman about the deadly side effects of the virus, but he died before that. Anyhow, there's no sign of Rodman or his vet girlfriend in this movie, which suggests they too were victims of the simian flu. In this chaotic world, human society and the government have collapsed, with factions of immune survivors living together in secret colonies set up in the ruins of San Francisco. One such community lived in a towered area, within the ruins of what formerly must have been a marketplace. The community is led by a former police officer named Dreyfus, brilliantly portrayed by Gary Oldman, of course. Left with only 2 weeks' worth of power supply, a bunch of humans, led by the protagonist Malcolm, ventured into the Muir Woods in order to reactivate a hydroelectric dam that can regenerate power and bring back life in the human community at San Francisco. Deep into the woods, Malcolm and his impulsive team member Carver encounter 2 apes, and in a moment of panic, Carver shoots the one named Ash, who is the son of one of Caesar's closest associates, Rocket. Meanwhile, this is the first time in the last few years that that the apes have encountered humans, and the scuffle and the gunshot noise alerted Caesar back inside his settlement. He rushed to the spot and spoke in his ape voice, asking Malcolm to leave with the human entourage. From the first film, we know that Caesar doesn't kill humans or apes, and hence he lets the human team go, something which greatly surprised Malcolm, played by Jason Clarke. Caesar is a family man now, whose wife Cornelia just gave birth to a son. Caesar and Cornelia are also parents to an elder son named Blue Eyes, who looks up to his dad and aspires to be a leader one day. Under Caesar's leadership, the apes have established a huge colony within the forest, where Cobra, Luca, and Rocket operate as Caesar's trusted lieutenants, and Maurice, the orangutan, trains the young apes to read, speak, and communicate. The apes ride horses within the forest and go hunting covered in white war paint. They're strong enough to take down gigantic bears and fend off any prey that may threaten their survival. However, betrayed by humans once, the apes maintain their distance from the mainland, with Cobra particularly hateful of the human race. Which is no surprise, really, given she was caged up in the Genesis labs and tortured with experiments for years. However, Caesar confides in Maurice that he still thinks about his human companions and also misses them sometimes. Anyhow, back to the main story. While Caesar decided to spare Malcolm and his team, Cobra urged him to pay the human settlement down at the San Francisco Bay a visit to establish who's boss of the woods. When Caesar and his army arrive at the human community riding horses, they return the bag of Malcolm's son Alexander as a sign of goodwill. Caesar also warns the humans to not venture into Muir Woods ever again, as that's their home. And in exchange, the apes promise to leave the humans alone on the mainland. Following this encounter, Dreyfus continues to abhor the apes as mutated, threatening animals, but Malcolm sees through Caesar and attempts to reason things out with him. He takes his wife Ellie, played by Kerry Russell, son Alexander, and Carver, the guy who shot Ash the ape previously, and lands up in Muir Woods again. Malcolm dares to walk into Caesar's ape settlement and tells him about their need to get the dam up and running for human survival. Caesar, who sees a reflection of his former human friend Rodman in Malcolm, agrees to let the team work in the woods in exchange for giving up the guns. Following their agreement, Malcolm and his team begin working on the dam, and are even saved by Caesar and his apes on one occasion from getting trapped in a tunnel. Just when the apes and humans were getting friendly with each other, Caesar's playful little one accidentally hunted through Carver's belongings and found a gun. This infuriated Caesar, who asked Malcolm to leave the forest immediately, despite their work remaining unfinished. Later, when Ellie offered to treat a dying Cornelia with antibiotics, Caesar allowed them to stay for an extra day, with one condition, that Carver has to go. By the end of their stay, Malcolm and his team managed to activate the dam and bring back electricity to the mainland, with Caesar finally coming to trust Malcolm. Meanwhile, Cobra is furious that Caesar has befriended the humans and comes up with a treacherous plan. He pays a secret visit to the human settlement in San Francisco and discovers their huge armory at Fort Point, which has all the guns and weapons from the pre-pandemic era in mint condition. When Cobra attempted to alert Caesar about this and convey his deep distrust of the humans, Caesar lost his cool and a fight began that ended with Caesar sparing Cobra and declaring, "Ape, not kill, ape." Embarrassed, Cobra decided to take matters into his own hands and landed up at the human armory again with his trusted few. He killed the human guards and brought a gun back to the woods, and in the dark of the night, stealthily sneaked up on Caesar and shot him in the chest. Without the other apes actually seeing who fired the gun, Cobra insinuated that it was Carver and that humans can't be trusted. With Caesar presumed dead, Cobra took leadership of the ape community and declared that each one of them must follow him. He first instructed the apes to loot the armory and then attack the humans with all their newfound firepower. Anticipating the attack, Dreyfus prepared his troops back at the colony, leading to a battle of epic proportions between the ape rebels and human military. While Dreyfus fired a rocket launcher, Cobra took charge of a battle tank and crashed through the gates. Once inside, Cobra asked Caesar's son Blue Eyes and Ash to kill the human prisoners, and they refused, saying Caesar wouldn't want that. To teach these young apes a lesson, Cobra killed Ash and revealed his true colors to Blue Eyes, who too, like his father, wasn't fond of killing humans. Back at the woods, Malcolm and Ellie discovered the wounded Caesar, who guided them back to his old house in San Francisco, where he lived with Rodman. Ellie is a trained nurse who wants to operate on Caesar to save his life, but she left all the supplies back at the colony, which is currently under Cobra's attack. When Malcolm sneaks into the colony to get the medical supplies, he bumps into Blue Eyes and brings the ape back to his dad. Reunited with his son, Caesar explains that it was Cobra who tried to kill him and not the humans. Realizing who the true villain is, Blue Eyes then freed Maurice, Rocket, Luca, and the other apes loyal to Caesar, who were kept hostage by Cobra, and together they returned to the colony to take down Cobra. Of course, a bloody battle ensued between Caesar and Cobra, with the latter attempting to kill the ape leader multiple times. While Cobra accused Caesar of being blinded by his love for humans, Caesar reprimanded him for sacrificing so many of his ape brothers just for power. Meanwhile, Dreyfus planted powerful explosives all around the towers in the colony in order to kill the apes with one single push of a button. Despite Malcolm's request to not go ahead with the plan, Dreyfus set off the explosions, which brought the towers crashing down, burying the apes in debris. When Koba recovered from the crash, he kept firing bullet rounds at the apes loyal to Caesar, which prompted Caesar to put an end to this ape menace once and for all. Instead of saving Koba, Caesar simply let him fall to his death down below at the debris. While it seemed this ended the war between humans and apes, Malcolm informed Caesar that Dreyfus had managed to establish contact with a military base up in the north, and that forces are on the way to San Francisco. In a final goodbye scene, Caesar told Malcolm that apes started the war, and humans will not forgive. And as their leader, Caesar must deal with the consequences. He urged Malcolm to leave with his family, while Caesar began preparing the apes for the impending war. War for the Planet of the Apes, 2017. So far, we've seen the rise of the apes and the dawn of their new empire, and in 2017 arrived the saga of their war. The third installment in the series, also helmed by Matt Reeves, is titled War for the Planet of the Apes, and not War of, which only means that Caesar will give it all to save his ape clan, and that's exactly what happened. The film is set some 5 to 2 years after Koba started the war with humans, and Dreyfus sent out a distress signal to the military in the north asking for help. The signal was intercepted by the remaining members of the US Army in the north, who dispatched a ruthless army colonel, played by Woody Harrelson, to take down the apes. The colonel's battalion calls themselves Monkey Killers and operates with only one goal: the absolute obliteration of apes. To top it all, the ape followers of Koba have joined the colonel, who spared their lives in exchange for serving in the militia. These apes are derogatorily called donkeys by the colonel and his men. The battalion's mission is to hunt down and kill Caesar, who's been living in hiding for over 2 years now and been commanding the war from his secret lair deep into the woods. The film begins with the colonel's forces spotting a bunch of gun-wielding apes in the Muir Woods and bombarding their trenches. However, the tables turn when Caesar and his apes arrive on horses and bomb the humans into submission with the makeshift explosives. Instead of killing the human survivors, Caesar sends them back to the colonel with a message for peace. Leave the forest to them, and there shall be no retaliation. Plus, Caesar stressed on the fact that the ape that attacked humans, Koba, is long dead, so there's really no reason to fight on. Instead of reciprocating to his peace message, the colonel personally tracked down Caesar's family and killed his wife Cornelia and eldest son Blue Eyes in the dark of the night, leaving Caesar's infant son Cornelius as his only family. The mishap happened when Caesar was betrayed by an albino, white-furred gorilla who shared the location of the apes with the colonel. He arrived to shoot down Caesar, but having never seen him, the colonel misidentified the apes and killed his family instead. Following this tragic loss, Caesar decided to relocate the entire clan of apes to a new green land. Caesar planned to distract the colonel and his army all alone so that the apes can make it safely across the desert without getting detected by the monkey-killing battalion. But what Caesar really wanted was to kill the colonel himself and avenge the death of his family. While the rest of his clan went on without him, Caesar was joined by his trusted three, Maurice, Luca, and Rocket, on his manhunt. Along the way, they tracked down Winter and extracted information about the colonel's location, with Caesar accidentally killing Winter, something that goes against his own motto, ape not kill ape. Caesar also non-hesitantly gunned down a human threat to protect Maurice and others, and this really brings out his darker instincts, because previously, Caesar was not only against killing apes, but he was also averse to hurting humans. But drastic times call for drastic measures, and Caesar was ready for it, or so it seemed. The setting shifts to a snow-laden landscape, and on the journey, Caesar and his friends chance upon another chimpanzee who calls himself the Bad Ape, and a mute little girl who Maurice later names Nova. Bad Ape escaped the Sierra Safari Zoo when the virus outbreak happened some 15 years ago, and took shelter in the ruins of a hotel. Bad Ape informed Caesar about a military base further north at the Californian border, and agreed to take him there in the hopes of reuniting with his son again, who may be a hostage there. Outside the military base, Caesar saw 3 shot-down soldiers left to die, and discovered that they too are mute, like the little girl they discovered. Spying from outside the colonel's camp premises, Caesar witnessed some atrocities that made his blood boil. He saw apes crucified on wooden stands and left to die in the cold. When he attempted to free one of them, Caesar realized that they were from his own clan. The colonel took the clan hostage when they attempted to cross the desert, and in the absence of their leader, Caesar, it was an easy feat for him. Caesar was soon captured by the military and produced in front of the colonel, who sadistically briefed him about how mercilessly he runs his military facility. He uses the apes as labor to build a gigantic wall around the facility without giving them any food or water for days. When Caesar witnessed a weakened orangutan being ruthlessly whipped, he roared in anger, causing an outrage among the enslaved apes. In order to show who's boss around the facility, the colonel threatened to kill Caesar so that the rest of the apes would go back to work. Later that night, when Caesar was left to die of cold and hunger, Nova sneaked into the facility and fed him food and water. Despite Despite all the torturing and starving and being kept in solitary confinement, Caesar decided to stand up for his apes and asked for food and water from the colonel. During this conversation, the colonel revealed what turned him into a deranged villain. Sometime in the past, the ALZ-113 virus that killed almost all of humanity mutated and found a way around to infect the immune survivors. The virus attacks a human's ability to speak and renders them mute. It also corrupts their higher thinking, turning them into primitive beasts. The colonel's only son was infected by this new strain, and the colonel had to shoot him dead in order to stop the virus from spreading. Ever since, he's made it his mission to kill off any and everybody infected with the virus, apparently for the advancement of humanity, which explains the mute dead soldiers outside the facility. A faction of this battalion revolted against the colonel's radical ways and reached out to his superiors in the northern military base. Unable to convince the colonel to let go of his killing spree, the northern battalion is currently on its way to put an end to the colonel menace, and the colonel is building the wall around his facility to keep the northern forces at bay for when they arrive. Fearing that the apes would perish in the impending battle between humans, Caesar devises a quick plan along with Rocket, who managed to enter the facility, and with Maurice and Bad Ape helping from outside the walls. While Rocket stole the keys to Caesar's cage, Maurice and Bad Ape discovered tunnels under the military base and dug out openings for the apes to escape through them. Once the apes were evacuated in the dark of the night, Caesar refused to join them and infiltrated the colonel's office as he has a score to settle with him. There, he found the colonel in a dying state, who's bleeding through the nose and has lost his ability to speak, confirming that he too is infected by the virus. While Caesar had the perfect opportunity to finish off this villain with one pull of the trigger, he laid the gun down and let the colonel take his own life. This is also the moment when the Northern Armed Forces attacked the base, resulting in a massive exchange of gunfire and grenades. Meanwhile, the fence guards spot the escaping apes running through the snowscape and begin to shoot them down mercilessly. This prompts Caesar to drop a grenade into a fuel tank to blast off the fence and the guards along with it. This was only made successful by a key move from Red, the gorilla who was Koba's follower and hated Caesar, but has come to see the goodness in him. As Red died, Caesar set off a chain of explosions that almost obliterated the military base. As he escaped through the tunnels, Caesar witnessed the Northern Battalion approach, and these people are infamous for their hatred of apes. Nature intervened, and an avalanche came down the snowy mountains, obliterating both the remnants of the colonel's military base and the new approaching army. The apes survived the avalanche by scaling trees, following which they make their journey to their new sanctuary, a forest by an oasis. As the apes begin to celebrate their newfound home, Maurice realizes that Caesar has a gaping wound on his chest and is dying. At the military base, Caesar was shot with an arrow by the same soldier whose life he'd spared during the opening fight in the film. Maurice bids goodbye to Caesar with a final promise that his son Cornelius would know about his father's legacy and what he did for the apes. In a tear-jerking scene, Caesar tells Maurice, "You are all home now. Apes are strong, with or without me," and takes his final breath while watching over Nova playing with Cornelius and the other young apes by the oasis. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes 2024. This brings us to the upcoming fourth installment in the reboot series, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Wes Ball of the Maze Runner trilogy. The film is set 300 years after Caesar died, in a world where apes are the dominant species and have established various civilizations around the green oasis that Caesar led them to. In this apparent ape utopia, the simian species train other animals and birds to do their bidding, while humans have returned to their primitive stages and are hunted down by the apes. Proximus Caesar has established himself as the self-proclaimed Ape King, who's risen almost to the status of a god by adding Caesar's name to his moniker. However, Proximus doesn't follow any of Caesar's teachings and is the real baddie of this ape kingdom. He's filled his arsenal with weapons forged from lost human technologies and is on the hunt for more. He's corrupted Caesar's benevolent teachings and has twisted them to enslave other ape clans. In this atmosphere of tyranny, a hunter chimpanzee named Noah begins to question Proximus's ways and befriends a feral human named Nova, which is a direct reference to the mute girl from the previous movie. Noah ventures on a harrowing journey to find out the true meaning of apes together strong and to discover Caesar's long-lost legacy, a quest that'll change the fate of apes and humans forever, the predecessors of the franchise. Now, these 4 reboot films aside, the Planet of the Apes franchise has 6 more movies, 5 of which are part of the original film series, releasing between 1968 and 1973. The 6th one, released almost 3 decades later, is a remake of sorts of the first Planet of the Apes film. Planet of the Apes, 1968. Like we said, the franchise was kick-started with 1968's Planet of the Apes. The film begins with a spaceship crew embarking on a mission 700 years into the future and crash landing on a cryptic planet sometime in 3978. Astronaut George Taylor soon realizes that apes are the dominant species of this planet, where humans exist as a mute and primitive species. Held hostage by the apes, George Taylor soon befriends an ape psychologist named Zira and her fiancé Cornelius, who are intrigued by Taylor's intelligence, whereas Taylor attempts to convey that he is actually an intelligent being, and not like the primitive humans on the planet. Despite facing challenges from the orangutan superior Dr. Zaius, Taylor and his mute human ally Nova discover traces of a past human civilization on the planet and come across the remnants of the Statue of Liberty in the final moments of the film. The harrowing realization dawns upon Taylor that this supposed alien planet is actually Earth, set years into the future, following a nuclear war that destroyed human civilization. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, 1970. 2 years later, released Beneath the Planet of the Apes, in which another astronaut named Brent crash lands on the mysterious planet looking for Taylor and his crew. Landing in the year 3955, Brent is taken aback by a society ruled by apes and comes to befriend Nova, who takes him around the underground ruins of New York City. Soon, Nova and Brent are captured by a community of mutated psychics who are actually the human descendants of those who survived the nuclear holocaust. They keep the apes at bay by using mind control and illusions. These mutants are in possession of a nuclear bomb and worship it as their only survival strategy against the apes. Brent discovers Taylor as a hostage of these mutants. As the apes, led by Dr. Zaius, close in on the mutants to attack, they decide to set off the bomb and destroy the entire planet. As Brent dies fighting against Zaius' ape army and most of the mutants perish in the battle, a mortally wounded Taylor triggers the bomb's detonation, obliterating the entire planet and marking the apparent end of humanity.
Zira, I want that baby. If you won't give it to me, I'll shoot.
Escape from the Planet of the Apes, 1971, the third entry into the series. Escape from the Planet of the Apes centers around the ape scientist Sarah, her fiancé Cornelius, and their friend Dr. Milo. Survivors of the nuclear holocaust of the previous film, the ape trio attempt to salvage Taylor's spaceship, but the shockwave of the planet's destruction send them back in time to 1973's United States. Owing to their intelligence and for hailing from the future, the apes are at first treated as celebrities. They work with their human scientist counterparts and befriend the likes of Dr. Dixon and Dr. Branson. But the president's science advisor Otto Haslien soon discovers that Zira is pregnant and gives her the truth serum to learn that she's experimented on humans in the future she comes from. Seeing the apes as threats and fearing for humanity's survival, Haslien decides to terminate Zira's unborn baby and sterilize the apes. Zira and Cornelius escape with the help of their human friends, and she delivers a baby son at a circus run by Armando. Zira and Cornelius eventually die fighting Haslien's forces, and the baby is secretly brought up by Armando at his circus. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, 1972. 1972 released the next sequel, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. The movie set in 1991, almost 2 decades after a plague from space wiped out the planet's cats and dogs. Now, humanity has enslaved apes and taken orangutans, chimpanzees, and gorillas as pets. Meanwhile, Zira and Cornelius' son has grown up to become Caesar, who's been asked by Armando to refrain from revealing that he can speak. Unable to overlook the brutality bestowed upon apes by humans, Caesar ended up shouting in public, which sets the authorities on his trail. Concealing his identity, Caesar lands up at Governor Breck's house to evade the authorities, but soon learns that Armando has taken his own life during interrogation by Inspector Culp. This triggers Caesar, and he decides to revolt against the oppression of apes by gathering and training an ape army. In the climactic battle, Caesar sets the city on fire and decides to publicly prosecute Governor Breck to make a statement. But better sense prevails, and he spares the governor in a merciful gesture, revealing apes are not beasts and that violence will only perpetrate violence. Battle for the Planet of the Apes, 1973. The fifth and final entry into its original series of Apes films, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, arrived in 1973. The events of the film are shown in flashback, as the orangutan named Lawgiver narrates the story of Caesar to human kids and young apes in the year 2670. Lawgiver's story is set in the early 21st century, when humans have destroyed the world with nuclear war, and Caesar has established a civilization of apes in Ape City, following the ape mutiny in the last film. But tensions grow at both ends, with a faction of humans fearing the apes, and a faction of apes despising their former oppressors. The gorilla Aldo rises as an opponent in Caesar's Ape City and wants to exterminate the humans, while Governor Culp and his mutated men take the charge on attacking Ape City. In the final clash, Caesar and his army finish off the mutant militia, but realize that Aldo has held innocent humans hostage. Caesar also learns Aldo is the one who killed his son Cornelius, breaking the most sacred law: ape shall never kill ape. He then chases Aldo and lets him fall to his death from a treetop. Realizing that apes are no better than humans, Caesar agrees to treat humans as equals and hopes for the day when the world would no longer need weapons. Planet of the Apes, 2001. 28 years after the final entry into the original Apes film series arrived Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes in 2001. Loosely based on the 1963 novel that started the franchise, the 2001 film was a remake of its 1968 predecessor, but with a modern take. Beginning in 2029, astronaut Leo crash lands at a strange alien planet in the year 5021 and finds a society ruled by humanoid apes who ride horses, speak English, and treat humans as slaves. Leo is caged too, and bored as a servant by the sympathetic chimpanzee Ari to save him from a torturous fate. As Leo escapes and frees up the other caged humans, he irks the wrath of the murderous ape general Thade. As Thade leads his ape army to attack the fleeing humans, another space pod arrives on the planet carrying Pericles. Pericles is Leo's ape assistant from the year 2029, who was lost in the same electromagnetic storm that sent Leo thousands of years ahead in time on this planet called Ashlar. With Pericles' pod finally finding its way to Ashlar, Leo escapes the planet by jumping into the undamaged pod and entering the electromagnetic storm to return to Earth. Upon crash landing in Washington, Leo sees a memorial dedicated to General Thade and realizes that Earth is now being dominated by apes. Marvelous verdict. So folks, that's all you need to know before hitting the theaters on May 10th to witness a new kingdom unfold and its eventual fate. Throughout cinematic history, the Planet of the Apes movies have remained notable for their rich world building and treatment of themes such as power dynamics, survival, race, and social prejudice, all the while creating epic stories one movie at a time. And we can't wait to see what Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has in store for us. We'll know it emerge as the new Caesar of this kingdom. Will he establish a society where humans can coexist with apes? Well, with that food for thought, we're signing off for now. But please don't forget to share your views on this in the comment section below. And if you liked our video, please stay tuned for more marvelous content. See you super soon.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.